Speaking of increased tension, an Iranian rocket passed within 1,500 yards of a U.S. aircraft carrier. Now, this happened in the Strait of Hormuz last week. Fox News learned about it from a senior defense official. Fox News military analyst Colonel Bill Cowan is with me now. So, Colonel, U.S. sources say the Iranian naval vessels fired several unguided rockets after giving 23 minutes notice, pretty short notice, that a live fire exercise would be carried out. So is Iran just pushing wherever it can?
Well, you know, Deirdre, there may be two sides of this story that haven't been adequately covered. It may well be that we knew long before that warning they gave us that they were going to do this kind of test, and because of that, we positioned ourselves close to the test in order to collect intelligence. That's kind of us in their face. And, of course, on the other hand, maybe this was a last-minute thing that they did with the presence of U.S. naval ships, a little bit of them in our face. So there may be two sides of this story, and we may never know what the answer is.
Okay, but in any case, the United States has been complaining about Iranian war games. Iran, in this case, and this is to your point, Colonel, saying it's not breaking any maritime rules. Without knowing both sides, do you at least agree with that Iran did not break rules?
Well, no, I expect that they did break rules. But, you know, if you think about it, our response has been a little bit muted. That is, if it happened a week ago and the administration wasn't up in arms and yelling and screaming, of course, they wouldn't want to because they don't want to do anything. The administration doesn't want to do anything that might jeopardize the nuclear deal. So they probably preferred to keep this kind of quiet until it surfaces a story. But I would say there's a reasonable chance that we picked up a lot of good intelligence by being close to that chute. We would be able to map some of their communications from the tactical level down to the little commander that was firing those missiles. We might have got a little bit of information about the guidance. We might have picked up a little telemetry about how far that thing was. There's all kinds of things, I'm kind of getting to my point, all kinds of things we could have picked up by being that close to a test like that. Okay,
now speaking of a test like that in our response, I hear what you're saying, that so far the U.S. has not been particularly punitive, but the Obama administration is preparing to sanction nearly a dozen companies and individuals in Iran. It even actually goes a little bit further. United Arab Emirates. There are a few other places that have been selling arms to Iran, and the U.S. is considering these sanctions. So does that become a strong enough message? And then just for people who haven't been following as closely as you have, this would be the first sanctions since that nuclear framework, that nuclear deal was agreed on this summer.
No, my guess would be that even these sanctions right here are a little bit minor in the greater response. It looks like we're doing things. The administration wants everybody to believe that we're on top of Iran and we're pushing them and we've got the upper hand. But I think any of us who follow Iran closely, our relationship with Iran and Iran's relationship with us, would never believe for a second that this administration is pushing Iran to the limits like it probably needs to be pushed in order to make sure there's not, at some point in the future, a nuclear-capable Iran.
Okay, so, Colonel, speaking of relationships, the Wall Street Journal reporting that the NSA continued surveillance of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other U.S. allies. And this is really flying in the face of a promise from President Obama 2 years ago that the NSA would stop essentially eavesdropping on allies. What does this say about our relationship with Israel? And we know, obviously, that Netanyahu was very much against the nuclear agreement that the U.S. formed with Iran this summer.
Well, I think the fact that the NSA was doing this despite the president's assurances that these kinds of things wouldn't happen speaks volumes about the relationship that this White House has with President Netanyahu, and in my judgment, in many respects, with Israel overall. But I would add something if I could, and that is that if we had a really good relationship, as we should have, as we've had in the past, we wouldn't need to be spying on them. The Israeli ambassador would be in the White House all the time, talking with the President of the United States, or the President of Israel, the Prime Minister, would be over here all of the time, talking with the administration about what they're doing, what they're planning to do, and what they need help on. It appears, by all accounts, that this was also an attempt to find out where Netanyahu was going with respect to not only our nuclear deal with Iran, but with respect to maybe attacking Iran and destroying their nuclear capabilities. So, again, this all speaks volumes to the relationship. And, Deirdre, as you know, a lot of U.S. congressmen were caught up in all of this eavesdropping, a lot of their names, a lot of the conversations they had with with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I'd say this story has a long way to go before it finds an end.
It certainly does, and it has also come out, to your point, Colonel, that Netanyahu was reaching out to certain congresspeople, as you just mentioned there, and leaking some of the framework of this nuclear deal, of course, with the idea to essentially sabotage it, because Israel clearly did not want that deal to happen, felt it was a mistake, and there are many here in this country who think the same thing.
Well, I agree. You know, you're remembering again that President Netanyahu, or Prime Minister Netanyahu, excuse me, looks at this as an existential threat. A nuclear-armed Iran presents an existential threat to Israel. Iran has said repeatedly, even up to the recent times, that it's their intent to wipe Israel off the map. Having a nuclear weapon capability is in their best interest to do what they want to do. In contrast, our administration is rushing forward as fast as it can to sign some kind of a deal with the Iranians, which, although we want on the outside to make it look like they will not be nuclear capable, the premises are in there, the foundation is in there for them to become nuclear capable within 10 years, maybe sooner.
So, Colonel, in your experience, to what extent should the average citizen here be worried about the state of affairs in the Middle East? Is this time now more tense or less tense than any other time that you have lived and worked through?
Well, thank you, Deirdre. I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East working on operations on behalf of our country, and in my experience, and some of that is reasonably recent, we're in a worse situation right now in the Middle East than we ever have, and we can go through all the countries and all the problems that are going on. And the irony of it is, to me, that one of our strongest allies over there could be or should be Egypt. And this administration continues to kick Egypt around because the current president of Egypt, al-Sisi, helped push the Muslim Brotherhood, the previous administration in Egypt, out. And, you know, the Muslim Brotherhood is now viewed as a terrorist organization inside Egypt and Saudi Arabia. This White House still holds a grudge against President Sisi for pushing the Muslim Brotherhood out. We have not treated Egypt right. Egypt should be our strongest, most vocal, most active partner in the war against ISIS. We haven't really asked them to participate, and they've got a rather large army that could help.
All right. I hope Egyptians are listening, diplomats are listening. Colonel Bill Cowan, so glad to have you. Thank you so much.